What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, September 26, 2016, start of a brand new week, start of the last week of the month here, getting into October and Halloween, and all the little costumes and goodies are already out there in the stores for us to just go on and buy like crazy. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big news today is the debate, which is scheduled for 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, actually. It's going to be basically 90 minutes straight, no commercial breaks, no coughing breaks allowed, no stool, but with a question mark behind that one. Frankly, they've been spending so much time in the run-up to this. The actual debate may seem almost anticlimactic. The level of expectancy is very, very high. Oh, this is going to be a game changer. Now, going into this thing, the reality is that Hillary Clinton, in order to win the debate, is going to have to find some way to humiliate or embarrass Donald Trump. But the public perception, because the corporate media is so obviously on the side of Hillary, and they're all in attack mode right now, Donald Trump can win this thing just by getting through to the end of it without losing his cool. And even Fox News was saying the bar is set much higher for Hillary going into this because of the public perception that Donald Trump is the outsider, that the establishment has literally declared war on him, and to heck with what those gosh darn voters are thinking and saying here. Now, obviously, a lot of people are tuning in on the off chance that Hillary Clinton might just fall off the stage. This is 90 minutes on her feet, no stool. She can lean on the podium. That's going to be about it. But at this point, if there is a medical emergency, the official rules are microphones will not be muted. That will be it. But I would not rule out sudden technical difficulties cutting the live feed from up there in New Hampshire in order to save Hillary from an incredible embarrassment. And a lot of people are basically out there saying this is really a big part of what people are tuning into the debates. Story coming out of the Daily Bell, just commenting on how the corporate media isn't even addressing the question of whether Hillary can get through 3 debates without a medical crisis. Now, I'm sure that Hillary is getting juiced up with the very best medications money can buy, legal, illegal, otherwise, alternative. This is a very real possibility. The corporate media is ignoring it. They're saying, it's going to be focused on policy, which it ought to be really. They're already out there trying to tell Donald Trump, don't be too aggressive, don't go on the attack. You'll be seen as, whipping on a poor little old lady. But if Donald Trump just goes on out there and continues to be Donald Trump, he's going to do all right. Now, Hillary is going to be coming on out talking about national security and demonizing Russia at every single breath. She's going to be talking about how Russia did this and Russia did that and evil Russians are doing this and all the rest of that. And this has become her stock in trade. The Kremlin boogeyman is to blame for everything. She's very much on board with this agenda to get a new world war going in order to please the military-industrial complex and her backers and the war party in general. Now, a poll coming out of Rasmussen is showing 46% of the American people are absolutely convinced the moderators are going to try and help Hillary Clinton in the upcoming debates. This idea that they are fair and objective and balanced, it's just not there. And a lot of other people are asking, will Hillary be wearing that radio earpiece so she can be cued from off stage? And I think the giveaway will be her hairstyle. If the hairstyle she's wearing covers the ear, that's a good reason to think that she's doing that. Now, one of the things that Hillary demanded of the debate was for the moderators to, in effect, debate Donald Trump for her and call him out on any statements he might make that are deemed to be inaccurate in the eyes of the establishment. And the moderators are saying, no, that's really way, way outside our job for us to do the debate for you. And Hillary's campaign is very angry about that. But Hillary did get one concession from the debate moderators, and that is the fact that if you look very carefully, the podiums do not match each other. Hillary's podium has been engineered, if you will, to make her look like she's larger than she really is, because when you stand Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, he towers over her. And that carries a psychological advantage in the eyes of the campaign poll workers. And so they're already fudging the scenery, the stage, to try and make Hillary look larger and more lifelike than she really is. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Obviously, we're talking about the upcoming debate for tonight. And we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. James in Maui, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good morning. You talked to a lady last week, and she wanted to make a declaration of rights on her driver's license. They said they wouldn't allow that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I've done the research on, and it got me when I was a kid. I got a traffic ticket, and the justice of the peace said, the Constitution doesn't apply in this court.
Well, a lot of judges have been saying that. But, James, let me ask you a question. With the debate looming in just a few hours, why is this issue of whether you can alter your name on your driver's license so uppermost in your mind?
Well, it was because it's kind of left over from last week. And basically, as far as that goes, if she stays on her feet, mainstream media is going to say it was a victory. And so we already know that.
Well, I mean, at this point, there isn't anything Hillary can do that the corporate media will not cover up for. She could spontaneously combust and burst into flame, and the media will report it as her showing her moment of brilliance.
Well, I know they're going to cook the polls anyway, regardless. It's just pretty much...
Well, all we can do is to keep on pointing out how the polls are being rigged. The opinion polls are being rigged. And again, that Rasmussen result, where 46% of the respondents said they think the moderators are there to help Hillary Clinton, shows that the corporate media can't get away with this stuff anymore. We're on to their little game. And because of that, Americans are sick and tired of being treated like they're morons. And there's a great deal of anger out there at the total lack of respect that's being shown both by the government and the corporate media towards the American people. And that's a big part of what's fueling Donald Trump's campaign. We're angry. We're fed up with being treated like we're children, like we're brainless, like we're morons, that we have to be managed and herded. And it's time for all of that to come to an end. So, James, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. No, thank you. We're going to let you go here. We're going to worry about leftover items after the election. Okay, save them all up for November 9th, and we'll cover those things. Now then, over the weekend, there was a lot of talk about how Donald Trump was going to invite Jennifer Flowers to sit in the front row of the debate right next to Mark Cuban. Jennifer Flowers apparently responded she would be there, but apparently there's been a last-second change because Trump's campaign is concerned that having Bill Clinton's lovers in that room, first of all, they don't have enough chairs, and second of all, it borders on the edge of turning the entire debate into basically a circus of gotchas, and they don't want to do that. So Jennifer Flowers is not going to be there that we are aware of at this time. However, Donald Trump, in all seriousness, is bringing one of the Benghazi survivors and a Gold Star mother to the debate. And I think they will be a lot more powerful than Jennifer Flowers. Because Jennifer Flowers, that's 20 years ago. And Benghazi is current events. the treatment of our soldiers, the treatment of the parents of those soldiers who've been killed and crippled, that is a current scandal. Now, there are some new bits of information that are starting to leak out. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have not delivered on their promise of a knockout blow before the first debate. Unless something comes out in the next few hours, they haven't. But emails have been leaked out showing that Hillary Clinton sponsored the Arab Spring program as Secretary of State that threw the entire Middle East into turmoil and chaos, including, apparently, the coup d'etat that took Mubarak out. And a lot of people were saying, wasn't Mubarak an ally? Yes, he was. He just wasn't being an ally enough. And apparently the U.S. government did the same thing to Mubarak that they tried to do to Erdogan, who was also supposed to be our ally. You're not an ally enough, therefore we're going to replace you. They're regime changing the regimes that are on the side of the U.S. That's how out of control it is. Now, as you know, most of Hillary Clinton's recovered emails are being held until after Election Day, because the establishment needs to keep you as ignorant and stupid and clueless as possible until Election Day so that you will believe those TV commercials about what a swell person Hillary Clinton is going to be. And there really is no justification for withholding them, but they're sitting there saying, no, after Election Day, not a moment sooner. It might unfairly prejudice the voters against Hillary Clinton. Well, how are we supposed to make a meaningful decision for the leadership of this country if we don't know what that leadership, what those nominees have been doing? I mean, Hillary Clinton keeps campaigning against Donald Trump on his lack of experience and how she has so much more experience. Okay, fine. Let's see what that experience resulted in. Let's see what was actually done. Not just have Hillary up there saying, I was Secretary of State, just stop thinking at that point and vote me into the White House here. All right, we're going to grab another phone call. Jeff in Toronto, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I called you last week, and I was discussing the whole Mark Cuban thing, how he's going to be showing up at the debate to sort of like maybe make Donald Trump nervous. And over the weekend, Donald Trump said he's going to bring on Jennifer Flowers, and he might have some more of the women in Bill's life. So I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be, because I thought that was pretty good decision.
Well, if you've been listening to the show, you would know that Flowers is now not going to be there. Donald Trump is instead bringing one of the survivors of Benghazi and a Gold Star mother. Okay. And those two are going to make Hillary Clinton far more nervous and stressed than Jennifer Flowers would, because from Hillary Clinton's point of view, Jennifer Flowers is old news. Her life was destroyed. We've taken care of her. We don't have to worry about it. But the Benghazi situation is still an open sore on her campaign, as well as the treatment of our soldiers and their families.
Yeah, I just turned on the radio now, so I didn't hear that before, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
The other comment was, with regards to the withholding of the emails, do you think that Assange will drop the ball and like sort of like put that in the public domain because he might have access to that, despite the fact that there's a, you know...
Well, again, WikiLeaks and Assange had promised another document dump before the first debate, and it hasn't happened. And so, you know, it could very well be that Hillary Clinton made Julian Assange an offer he couldn't refuse. There have been a couple of prior cases in WikiLeaks history where they'll tease out that they have this very damaging information about a bank or a politician, and then all of a sudden it goes away. There was one banking scandal that WikiLeaks was teasing they were going to blow wide open, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, the hard drive that information was on was destroyed and we didn't have a backup. So I've never really gotten over this idea that Julian Assange, because if you look into his background and his youth, he's not necessarily an honest person. WikiLeaks might actually be a very complex extortion racket masquerading as a whistleblowing operation.
I've heard that, like other people, you know, postulate that before. I wasn't sure, what, you know, about that or not. I thought that in the past he has given out some information, but I know other people have been very critical of him and how he's, behaved.
Well, let me tell you why I was always dubious about WikiLeaks, because he registers the domain, and then 3 months later, he's the darling of the corporate media. He's on the cover of Time and Newsweek, and he hadn't blown any secrets at that point. Meanwhile, you had truth activists who'd been around for 10 years, really revealing government secrets, and the corporate media continues to ignore us. So there was something else going on there at the time.
Well, he's not the only activist, I guess. I guess there's other people, not necessarily just connected with WikiLeaks, that could, participate in having another data dump.
It's entirely possible, but what they may have been trying to do was set up WikiLeaks as the place for all whistleblowers to go to, and at that point they knew who they were and could track them, because we've seen how this administration has a war on whistleblowers. And it wasn't all that long ago, there were actually laws in this country that protected whistleblowers who went public when government or corporations were doing bad things. Those laws have now all gone away, and anybody who blows the whistle on a corporation or the government, they suffer for it. They even have laws now where the animal rights activists can be thrown in jail for documenting cruelty in the meat industry.
It's so disgusting. It's like, the way the world's going, that the evil people are getting protected and the good people are getting hung out to dry is just unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
Just one last remark about Hillary Clinton. I know a lot of people have been speculating that, it's going to be like a double out there or whatever. I mean, it's not going to be, but I think that she's going to be loaded up on a lot of drugs, though, I think.
I would imagine, yes.
20 minutes is a long time.
It is a long time.
20 minutes is a long time to be for someone who's got so many ailments under the sun, that I'm just going to be praying to God that, something collapses on her, she starts coughing, or she has another fit, because, I just think she's going to be heavily medicated, and she might have a hard time responding to Donald Trump because of that.
Well, that's why everybody thinks she's going to be wearing that little radio earpiece that she got caught with. And, if Donald Trump's campaign was really, really smart, they'd have radio jammers on the premises. Just jam that signal, leave her standing on her own, and just show that she really has always been a puppet, just saying whatever people want to hear or whatever her masters tell her to say. In fact, The Onion came out with this wonderful satire article, we just posted it, where HillaryClinton.com has gone through a web design where now when you go over to Hillary's policy area, you can change all of her positions until they line up with your worldview. And it's funny as all heck there. Oh, yeah, Hillary's in favor of banning abortion, and she hates and just flip it all around to so that Hillary is the candidate who best represents you. And it's funny as all heck, and I love what The Onion keeps coming out with in these satires.
Well, she's a complete prostitute. I mean, that's probably...
now we're going to get hate mail from the prostitutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, we won't. I've got a photo of all the working girls out at the Bunny Ranch, and they're standing there with big signs. Hillary's one of us. Yes, she is.
That's hilarious. Well, that's all I got for you, Mike. Take care. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Larry Klayman, who was a founder of Judicial Watch, and now he's down in Florida doing his thing. He had this ironclad RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. Unfortunately, it was assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who just threw the case out of court without even looking at it. Cronyism on display. Now he's got a new lawsuit that he is filing where he is representing family members of two of the people who died in Benghazi, Tyrone Woods and Sean Smith. They are suing Hillary Clinton for wrongful death, and as part of the discovery for that, Larry Klayman is demanding the immediate release of all emails related to Benghazi, and he may be able to pry them loose before that November 7th election day. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break. Oh, and here's an example of what I mean when I say Hillary Clinton says what she thinks people want to hear. Okay? We'll be right back. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And to give you an idea of how Hillary Clinton is flip-flopping all around, as you know, both she and Donald Trump had sit-down meetings with the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu. Hillary skipped going down to Charlotte in order to meet with Netanyahu. And during that meeting, along with backing the $38 billion deal of giving that much of your money to Israel so they can go on killing people around them, basically said she will continue to implement the P5+1 Iran deal, which is certainly not what Netanyahu wanted to hear. Then, when you couple that with this video tape, in which Hillary Clinton is out there saying, I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. And it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with any of those policy positions, it basically tells you you cannot rely on anything she is saying. Because she's saying whatever she thinks people want to hear, or she's making points. She's completely unreliable. How do you know Hillary Clinton is lying? Her mouth moves and words come out. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Errol in the Netherlands, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Am I on the show?
You're on the air.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I will bet that Hillary Clinton, because it is now almost 11 o'clock in the Netherlands. I'm going to wait till 3 o'clock so Hillary Clinton, together with Donald Trump, is going to have that conversation, you know, that...
the debate, yeah. Everybody's going to be recording this thing. Everybody's going to be recording this thing, even if we're watching it.
I bet one thing.
Yes.
Okay, I bet one thing. Listen. I bet one thing. I think Hillary is going to faint.
Well, I certainly hope so. I would love to see that happen. Let's be very honest here. And I'm sure that, again, she's loaded up on drugs to keep that from happening. But
exactly.
You know, she's got 3 debates to get through, and we know that her stamina just isn't there.
90 minutes. I want to see her 90 minutes speak to Donald Trump.
Well, we're going to get our chance to do that tonight. We only have a couple of minutes left in this. Okay, all right, well, we're going to let you go then. Thank you very much. And I'll tell you what, I've got these other 3 calls, but I'm going to leave them until the next commercial break because we don't have enough time. Interestingly enough, Hillary's campaign is encouraging the FBI to investigate Donald Trump over allegations that he was meddling with foreign policy, in other words, the Logan Act. And it has to do with the fact that one of Donald Trump's representatives has been talking with Russian officials about things that might happen if Trump becomes president. Now, that's not changing foreign policy. It's talking about what foreign policy will do when Trump is president and has the authority to change that foreign policy. And I'd like to remind everybody, this is the same FBI that gave Hillary Clinton a free pass on felony violations of Title 18. And I would like to remind everybody that back in the mid-1980s, when George Herbert Walker Bush and then Governor Bill Clinton were manufacturing and smuggling weapons into Nicaragua, which was clearly illegal, violation not only of the Logan Act but the Boland Amendment, the FBI did not investigate until Eugene Hassenfuss's smuggler plane crashed and made the whole stink public. So the FBI is being very, very selective here. They're just trying to find anything they can demonize Donald Trump for. But Donald Trump is hardly the first president to go on out and discuss with world leaders what might happen if he becomes president. But that's all they are. They're discussions. And I'd like to mention one more thing. Hillary's trying to make a big deal over the fact that Trump said he opposed the Iraq War, and then when he was being interviewed on Howard Stern at one point, he said, well, maybe, okay. But there's a difference here. Donald Trump, when he did that interview, was not in a position to influence the Iraq War one way or the other. Hillary was. She voted for it. We'll be right back with phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to start taking some phone calls. Robert in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Robert in Georgia, are you there?
We lost him.
We lost him. Let's go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I know the debate tonight's important, but if the facts are true with the Pentagon not following the State Department and doing that strike on the Syrian Arab Army, then it doesn't matter, Mike. Like, the important, Mike, Aleppo is it. You know, this Aleppo is where the Russians shot the 3-caliber cruise missiles and hit the intelligence office. Aleppo is the stronghold for the remaining of these terrorists.
Yes.
Washington's not going to let this go, so there's going to be something going on. I know people are watching the elections, but Aleppo is it, Mike. I mean, this is it, you know?
No, you're absolutely right here. And again, when we get into Syria, we're going to be talking. It looks like we are starting to see a schism open up between the military-industrial complex and the civilian government. Because the indications are that the order to attack those Syrian forces, which was clearly intended to derail the possibility of peace, may not have originated with the executive branch, but within the Department of Defense itself, which would technically amount to mutiny on the part of the Pentagon and its officials. But it looks like the war party is just desperate to have more war, even to the point of defying the civilian government of this nation.
Yeah, Mike, we are at a dangerous time. The Russians are sending back their aircraft carrier, and it's not leaving. This aircraft carrier is going to be staying, and there's a reason for them doing it. Aleppo is the final straw. Putin's not back. The Russians are not backing down. Syria's not backing down now. This is it. Throw that in with Deutsche Bank on the brink, Commerce Bank of Germany laying off 9,000 people. Mike, we are coming at a crossroads. I don't want to scare people, but I mean, there's a lot going on in the next few days.
There's no question we're heading to a major crisis. And again, it goes all the way back to that 11th marble concept. They couldn't keep it going. And the conventional wisdom is that when they create an economic mess, they get into a world war to get out of it or at least distract from it. But that's not going to work this time because everybody knows that's what's going on.
And, Mike, on Hillary Clinton, the previous caller said she's going to faint. She won't because they added more strings to her body.
She may have one of those exoskeleton suits on, you know, underneath her clothing. If she's dressed in all that baggy, sacky stuff, then she literally may be wearing braces to stay standing for 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's just scary now because I just don't think the military-industrial complex, neocons, are going to Aleppo to let Aleppo go now because they're so far into this now, they're not going to let it go, Mike.
Well, they can't let it go because if the U.S. gets kicked out of Syria, it's this generation's version of Vietnam, and it's going to derail the entire war agenda that they've been following to conquer the Middle East and shackle it to the U.S. dollar. And if the U.S. gets kicked out of Syria, first of all, Obama doesn't want that as part of his legacy, but it looks like it's going to happen. Once the terrorists are out of Syria, the United States does not have a legitimate reason to be there. In fact, they don't have a legitimate reason to be there right now. The reality is they are in Syria without the permission of the Syrian government, without the invitation of the Syrian government. It's just the U.S. sticking its nose into other people's business like it's been doing since the end of World War II, and the world is getting sick and tired of it.
And people, just to let you know, Aleppo, I think, is the second largest city in Syria next to Damascus, or second most important. So,
well, it was important because up until this whole attempt by the U.S. to get rid of Assad, Aleppo was the economic hub of the entire nation. That's where all the banking was, all the corporate offices were there for all the industries that were in Syria. Aleppo is kind of Syria's version of New York. Damascus is Washington, D.C., Aleppo is New York.
And you know what? They always say Assad's a bad guy, this person's a bad guy, that person's a bad guy, but we don't seem to have a problem arming the terrorists, you know, so who's actually the bad guy here? You know, this is very common sense mentality here.
Yeah.
People can just think, you know.
The U.S. in fact, don't even use good guy, bad guy. There is no question the U.S. has been the aggressor in all of this war for the last going on, 14, 15 years now.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Robert in Georgia came on back. So, Robert, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Sorry about that, Mike. We've got a little storm going on here.
Okay.
Last week I called in and I gave the opinion that I thought if Hillary even made it to the debates, that they would let her because she would crash and burn, and they might have somebody waiting in the wings. But I've been thinking on this all weekend, Mike, and I'm gonna tell you. If you just listen to me a minute, I might get blackballed, but this is not what everybody's talking about, but it's a little different. I got to thinking about it. I do not want to see anything happen to Hillary tonight. Let me tell you why. Mm-hmm. My opinion. Donald Trump is definitely the man we need. He's a businessman. He's a deal maker. Business people are very disciplined people. Has to be in business. And yes, he can be a little outlandish at times, but he knows when to and when not to. Now, if something happens to Hillary tonight, as far ahead as Trump is in the polls, he's going to almost win by default.
Well, in a nation with honest elections, Donald Trump would be winning by a landslide. The problem is our establishment is revealing itself to be a true dictatorship. They will pick the leaders, and then the media's job is to convince you they were democratically elected, and everybody understands now that's a complete lie.
My theory is if he is so-called elected by default because something happens to Hillary, is he will almost start off as a lame duck president. He needs to go in with a mandate of the people, because what he's facing and what he's got to do and what has to be done to salvage the situation is like we're in very dangerous times.
Okay, we're having problems on your phone line, but let me just say this. This is exactly why I've been saying that along with Donald Trump, we need to clean the Congress out of all those old fossil incumbents, the Israel firsters, the war hawks, the Wall Street puppets. We need to work to give Donald Trump a Congress that will work with him and not obstruct his every move. Donald Trump in the White House is not going to solve the problems. I agree with you on that. But we can solve the problems by sending a message and voting out all these old career politicians like John McCain, who've been there way, way too long, Harry Reid, all of these corrupt politicians. It's time to clean out the people's house.
Absolutely. The neocons have to go.
Absolutely.
But we need a mandate with this man in office like there was with Reagan. He doesn't need he's going to have hard enough time as it is. And if he goes in as a lame duck default president because somebody passed out, coughing fit, whatever, I know she's a crook. Everybody knows she's a crook. I'm the ABC crowd. Anybody but Clinton, okay? But if something happens tonight, it's what everybody's watching for.
Yep.
And I don't want a revolution in this country. I understand we cannot stop our economic collapse we're going to have.
No, we can't. And it's going to hit the entire world. You know, the one thing, when this global economic crash happens, the one thing we have to be on the lookout for are a bunch of carpetbaggers coming into town and saying, well, we're just going to restart private central banking all over again and everything will be hunky-dory for maybe 50 or 60 years. Then it'll go to heck again in a handbasket, and anybody coming on in saying we need another private central bank loaning the currency into circulation at interest needs a good, thick coating of tar and feathers and a trip out of town on a redwood rail.
Absolutely. We're going to have to pay our penance for letting our government do what it's done to the American people over the years.
Well, I got to tell you this right now. I don't see the American people stop being angry and, just on November 7th. Donald Trump is going to go into the White House with a huge amount of support of the American people behind him. and he's going to have that bully puppet advantage, and he's going to be able to tell members of Congress, look, you go along with changing some of these agendas, or the next election that you're up for re-election, I'm going to campaign against you, and that will be a credible threat.
I pray that you're right. I really do. I just didn't want him to go in almost under default because something happened to Hillary and him not having the mandate that he would have had.
I understand what you're saying, but let me tell you where I'm coming from. Anything that gets Hillary out of the race is good. Okay? If she gets caught out with more email leaks, if somebody finally gets the goods and is able to arrest her, if she bursts into flame on the podium tonight, I don't care. We just need to break the hold of the Bush-Clinton narcocracy on our nation and take it back. And so at this point, anything that gets her out, I'm in favor of.
Well, I agree with her. Anything gets her out. I'd rather it be. I want to see Trump going there with his.
At this point, we can't afford to be picky. Anything that gets Hillary out, that'll be fine. All right, Robert, we're going to let you go because we're running out of time, and I want to go to George in Texas. George, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, Mike? Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hear me?
Yes, you're on the air.
You know, another reason we've got to get Trump in the office.
Use Mr. Tongue and Mr. Lips.
What's that?
Nothing. I'm being glib.
Well, anyway, reason why I got to get Trump into office is talking to our local sheriff's department. It's like they are getting pressure from the feds and the United Nations to come under the Strong Cities Initiative, and the county sheriff wants no part of it because they're trying to eliminate the office of the county sheriff, which is elected, and make it all federal police, which I don't want. I think Donald Trump has made it clear about some of the intrusive UN policies trying to foist upon the United States, and the Strong City Initiative, which is UN, which is a Department of Justice. I hope Trump will be able to reverse that.
Well, he'll certainly be able to reverse that. What's going on here is that all these people who've been plotting and planning for a one-world government, new world order for decades are all of a sudden seeing the very real possibility it's all going to fall apart on them. Whether it's the collapse of the European Central Bank, the backlash from the refugee crisis, the fact that Russia and China do not want to surrender their sovereignty to a global government, and they're hitting the panic button. They're throwing as much money as they can at Hillary Clinton because if Donald Trump gets on in with his Make America Great Again agenda, then the co-opting of the United States for the New World Order is over and done with for at least 8 years or until they try and shoot him. And so the New World Order is literally fighting for its continued existence and influence, and the more they do, the more obvious they become.
Well, yeah, another thing I'll just hang up. I just hope Hillary does mediocre enough to keep the Democrats from trying to force her out, but enough to make her lose more voters.
Well, if she does have an incident on the stage tonight, she's going to be out, period, end of discussion. And the question is going to be, will the DNC put Bernie Sanders back into the nomination because he got the second highest number of votes, or are they going to kick him out again and put in Joe Biden, who's a much better debater? There's this ridiculous idea that's been floating around the Internet about how they may consider putting Michelle Obama in as the nominee because she'll attract the women vote and the black vote and blah, blah, blah. But it shows just how desperate they are right now. They hitched their wagon, to a dead horse, and now they're stuck with what's going to happen.
Like I said, I want to do mediocre enough where the Democrats can't force her out, but good enough that she, not saying good enough, but just mediocre enough where she just stays flat. You know what I mean? Because I want Hillary Clinton to be that ball and chain.
I'm not going to be picky. I'm not going to be picky. This close to the election, anything that gets Hillary out is fine by me. If the UFO mothership comes on down and kidnaps her to take her away to do experiments on her, I'm okay with that. Just anything that gets Hillary out of this race. Then we can all take a deep breath and start looking at the long view of what it's going to take to get our republic back with truly democratically elected leaders. That's where we need to go.
Well, I think we should apologize to John Gotti because they treated her more harshly. They're treating Hillary, and she's done far worse than John Gotti. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And let's see, I think we already did Robert in Georgia. Glenn in Philadelphia. Okay, Glenn, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I understand what you're saying about Hillary, but I may be a little concerned. Part of me would like to see them hobble her through and then have her soundly defeated in both the popular vote and in the Electoral College, leaving no ambiguity about the question. That way, the Trump vote would appear to be more of a clear-cut mandate. My nightmare scenario would be for something to happen to Hillary now, and for them, and since Kane is not, and he is not a known celebrity figure, would be if they were to reharness the Bernie momentum and bring him back on a dark horse, the resurrected Jewish savior of the Democratic Party.
Well, you need to understand something. If Hillary still has a pulse on November 7th, they're going to try and steal the election for her. They're telegraphing that all over the place right now. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're rigging the election for Hillary Clinton. And so this idea of saying it's okay to let her coast some more and then we'll have an electoral college victory and a popular vote victory for Donald Trump, no, that's not a given. The people that are behind Hillary Clinton, the narcocracy, you need to understand, these people are criminals. They became rich and powerful by being criminals, running guns and drugs down to Nicaragua, well, guns to Nicaragua, drugs back, selling that to our kids in the streets of America. Do you think these people are going to play fair or play by any rules and allow themselves to lose the iron grip they've had on the throat of the nation?
No, and in that vein, one could speculate that once elected and sworn in, she could be in even graver danger of assassination, because then she could be a heroine, a martyr. She could be lionized and given an eternal flame in Arlington right next to JFK.
Well, that would be a horrible, horrible insult, I think. Glenn, we're going to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we got a caller waiting on the line who wants to talk about Syria. And I'm going to ask you to be patient. Because I want to finish up on the election and campaign stuff and sort of lump all the Syrian developments together here. Down in Florida, they have completed their early voting. Donald Trump won by 120,000 votes. This is historic because no Republican has ever won the early voting in Florida ever, ever, ever. And it's a harbinger of things to come. Donald Trump needs not just a thin margin. He needs an overwhelming landslide too big for the vote riggers to overcome without it being very obvious what's going on. Now, for the first time ever, the National Immigration and Customs Enforcement Council is endorsing a presidential candidate, and it is Donald Trump. And between that and developments in Florida, I'm sure that Hillary and Obama are out there saying, oh, we got to push harder. We've got to rig this election. We can't let the people decide the future of this country. They might want to run the country for themselves and their children. And, you know, we've built our fortunes on looting the American people and getting them to work hard and expect to keep too little of what they make. So as you know, there's a big stink over all of these illegal immigrants who were scheduled for deportation for security concerns, criminal records, illegal activity, sexual assaults in this country, and all of a sudden, 800 of them were made instant citizens. Then we had that leaked email that came on out saying that Obama had ordered the Immigration and Naturalization Service to go into overtime, literally paying overtime to their workers to try and make as many illegals as citizens as possible, so they will be there, presumably, to vote against Donald Trump. And now there's another article out here from dailypolitics.com saying that illegal immigrants, the ones who can't become citizens by the deadline, are being registered to vote. down in Colorado, big stink over there. The dead are voting. This is why they keep saying Hillary Clinton is nearly tied with Donald Trump when he is pulling 80 times as many people to his rallies, because the dead can vote, but they can't show up at the rallies unless they walk in the door going, must have brains. But they found multiple cases of dead people who were voting in Colorado years after they had died. And this is why we have to have voter ID laws. And all these people out there saying, oh, voter ID, that's repressive, it's racist. No, they're trying to open up the door to steal the election. That's what they're doing. Now, as you know, we've been talking about things that we as voters can do on Election Day. I had the idea of just a paper tape tee. It's sort of blossomed, and other people are out there saying, red shirts. Just wear red shirts. I've already got mine. To make it obvious how many people voted for Trump. This is only going to work if everybody voting for Trump gets a red shirt. And no, I don't own stock in the red shirt making company. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute here. But I want to finish up on this issue about the upcoming election. Remember what Susan Sarandon said the other day? Well, it was actually about a month ago. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo isn't working. And that's what this election is really all about. This is not Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's ordinary Americans against an entrenched oligarchy. This election, and by the way, I know I keep saying November 7th, it's November 8th. It's a referendum on the status quo itself. This election is a referendum on the quality of work of the entire U.S. federal government. This election is a referendum on the honesty and trustworthiness of the corporate media. And that's why they're fighting so hard to stay in control. All right, let's take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, there was an article on LouRockwell.com today by Stephen Lendman, and it's about Russian warships destroyed Western and Israeli operations site in Aleppo province. I agree with Justin in New Jersey. Aleppo is the line in the sand, and the United States is trying very, very hard to provoke, intimidate, make some kind of incident that Russia will be forced to push back, and of course then there'll be the evil Russia. Mm-hmm. But the Russian forces are definitely eliminating the U.S. proxy army ISIS and putting a huge dent in that excuse that they're using everywhere they want to go, every country they want to invade. They're making a huge dent in eliminating that proxy army. So what do you think about that article?
Well, you need to really appreciate the timeline of what's going on. Because it all began with that U.S. strike on Syria's military forces, which the Pentagon is insisting was an accident, even though those forces had been in that location for a year. The lines weren't changing in that area until after the U.S. strike, when ISIS came on down and tried to retake the territory. But there's no question that was an intentional act. Russia did try and play by the rules. They called that coordination center on 2 occasions to say you're attacking Syria's troops, and the officer who was supposed to handle that was conveniently away from the phone for that entire hour that the attack was taking place. And this was Russia's basically sending a message, and Putin did this because he understood that the Western media couldn't really do much about it when it came out that this Foreign Intelligence Operations Center was staffed by Israelis, Americans, British, and so forth, because they're not supposed to be there. And there's certainly the idea that they were directing ISIS and Al-Qaeda in this battle only hammers home the point that the U.S. is actually supporting and aiding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That whole cover-up is starting to come apart. And there hasn't been much mention in the corporate news about this attack on this foreign intelligence site. There was a brief effort to try and claim that this was an unprovoked attack by Russia, but again, it happened after the U.S. attack on the Syrian troops. And remember, the U.S. does not have any legal grounds to be inside Syria, even if they're chasing ISIS and al-Qaeda, because Syria's government has refused permission for them to be there. They're not invited. The Russians are invited. They are there with the permission of Syria's government, and they are actually going after these terrorists that have been working for the United States of America. So it's going to be very hard to come up with some kind of a provocation in which the U.S. is going to be seen as the aggrieved party when the U.S. doesn't have any business being there in the first place.
I totally agree. Now, our media hasn't told us, but is anybody siding with Russia right now? Because they must be catching on to understand that the proxy army, ISIS, the proxy army, was created by the United States and probably with the Mossad, Israel's Mossad.
Yes. They
must know that. Is there anybody siding with Russia to say, hey, we're standing by you, we know what the United States is trying to do? I mean, is anybody doing that?
Well, yeah, Iran is, but that's not getting any media coverage either. Right now, the media is totally focused on Samantha Power, who's out there saying, bad Russia, they have to be kicked off the Security Council. You know, they're evil, Vladimir Putin passes wind in elevators. And nobody's buying it. There was an article we ran, I think, end of last week, where the people inside the UN are openly talking about the reality that the U.S. agenda is to get Assad. And it's always been to get Assad. And this idea that they're after ISIS and al-Qaeda, that whole thing has fallen apart. It's as big a whopper as Saddam's nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Another article of interest for you and your listeners on Lou Rockwell also today. Syrian foreign minister blasts U.S. and its allies as accomplices of terrorism. You may want to check that out. That's on LouRockwell.com today.
Okay, I'll take a look for that. Yeah, when you're arming terrorists, you're a state sponsor of terror, and that's what the U.S. is now exposed as. Worse than that, we, the American people, have been told that ISIS and al-Qaeda are our enemies in the war on terror, and we have President Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton giving aid and comfort to the enemy in a time of war. That's the legal definition of treason.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to take...
Exactly. Hey, thanks, Michael.
You got it. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We've gone on from politics and the debate. We're talking about developments in Syria, most of which are not getting a lot of coverage in the American corporate media because it's a huge embarrassment for the U.S. We may be on the verge of this generation's version of Vietnam. Now, the Syrian government now reports they have a recording of U.S. communications with ISIS that took place just before the attack on the Syrian military. And it hammers home the point one more time that the U.S. is using ISIS and al-Qaeda as proxies to overthrow the legitimate government of Assad and put in a puppet ruler. Okay, let's grab Steve in Maine. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve?
Hi. Steve from Mass?
Is it Mass? It's my mistake. Massachusetts.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was speaking to my friend today. Did you happen to catch 60 Minutes yesterday?
No, I did not.
Okay, neither do I, because it's really propaganda, a mouthpiece for the people to hear about. What he was telling me was it was about the new Cold War, and they're telling people how Russia is the aggressor and how they've taken over Crimea and pretty much that they need to be stopped. And they're talking about how the U.S. has these new weapons which could take out some of the facilities that they have, like this. Tell me they're arming like a bomber with some missiles, and they can go over there and take out like 80 locations of nuclear facilities around Russia. And what it seems to me is they're prepping the people of saying, well, look, we got this new... Also, they said Putin said that he's not afraid to use nuclear weapons if he has to. So it seems to me they're prepping the people in saying, you know, here's this Putin in Russia who looks like the aggressor, and the U.S. might be the person to come in and stop him from being the aggressor. And we got this new weapon. We can go in there. We can take out all these different weapon systems that they have within a couple days.
You know, that's a very important point to hit here. Now, back during the first Cold War, there were a lot of people who were very concerned about all these nuclear weapons that were back and forth, especially coming out of World War II, where people had seen some of what nuclear weapons can do. Most of the photos taken on the ground in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were actually classified. They didn't want the American people to see just how horrible a nuclear strike was, because they were, embarking on this nuclear weapons program, and then Russia started to catch up. And they literally embarked on a propaganda campaign against the American people to convince them nuclear war would be survivable in order to silence opposition to nuclear escalating. If you're my age, you probably remember seeing in school this cartoon featuring Bert the Turtle, Duck and Cover, and there was this one scene where they showed this family out having a picnic, and there's a bright flash overhead, and they pull the picnic cloth over them, like that's actually going to save them from a nuclear weapon. And they knew it was a joke when they made that, but the idea was to convince the American people that nuclear war was survivable. Everybody was building bomb shelters in their backyard, because the people are not going to go along with nuclear war if they really understood just how horrible it can be.
Yeah, that's a scary thing about it. They make it sound like, oh, we got this new weapon system. If Russia gets out of hand, we can just go in and take them out easily. And that, you and I both know that's not going to be the case.
No, it isn't going to be the case at all.
They're talking about first strike. Also in the show, they're talking about first strike and simulative attack on Russia, how they're organizing simulations on how they can attack Russia with a first strike. I mean, that's scary. All that propaganda they're putting out there.
Yes.
I mean, that's something they're actually thinking about doing.
Well, they're thinking about doing it because a very poor long-term thinking and planning about our nation following World War II. They got everybody to use the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking. Those dollars were being borrowed at interest from the Federal Reserve, or other countries were bringing us manufactured products and agricultural produce for boxes of ink and paper. And because of that, our government and Wall Street got very lazy. They let our manufacturing decline in quantity and quality. And on top of that, nobody wants our agriculture anymore because of the GMO experiment. And so if the U.S. cannot bring the world back to Bretton Woods, where the entire global economy routes through the Federal Reserve one way or the other, then it is all going to come apart. And they're willing to risk the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over which brand of ink and paper we're all supposed to use for the next 100 years. And all these people who are planning nuclear war, they're the best preppers of all. They've got bomb shelters built all over the place. They've reactivated the Greenbrier. Mount Weather is out there. They've got all of these places set aside. And your taxes paid for them. You will not be allowed into them, of course. And they figure if they make a mistake, well, they'll stay down in the bunker for 6 months or so, come on out, and it'll be a beautiful, natural world free of human beings, and everybody will be happy. But yeah, it's a very real possibility. It alarms me that 60 Minutes, which used to have a decent reputation for getting the facts, they've become just another bunch of prostitutes and correspondents for the corporate media pushing this war agenda with Russia. And still they're pushing, Russia's the aggressor, Russia stole Crimea. No, that is not what happened. I got into a debate in a comment section on an article talking about the referendums, and the paid government shill out there was saying, the referendums were fraudulent. This was an evil plan by Putin to steal Crimea. And just, they're out there frothing at the mouth trying to get people to buy the official propaganda, and nobody's falling for it because we know it is propaganda. The U.S. government has openly admitted they are using propaganda against the American people. By the way, that used to be illegal in this country. It was actually illegal for the U.S. government to propagandize the American people. That law has gone out the window, along with the laws that protect whistleblowers. And they're absolutely convinced that the only thing that will save the United States is a new world order. And if they become convinced that Donald Trump is going to win the White House, they will start that war before he can take office and stick him with it the way Herbert Hoover was stuck with the Depression of the 1930s.
Yeah, well, Russia is not Libya. This is a whole new phase, which, I don't think they really want to get into it.
No, they don't. Especially when you look at the quality of weapons that the U.S. is making. We make the most expensive weapons on earth, and it turns out they're junk. Now, do you remember about a week ago, there was a story about even though the F-35 has been declared ready for combat by imperial edict, even though it's missing key things like the helmet fire control system, the software for the cannon, all these other problems, they had to ground several of these aircraft because the insulation on the inside of the fuel tank is decaying in that refined kerosene, and the debris gets sucked into the fuel system and causes problems. Now, that's an expensive fix. It basically means replacing the fuel tanks, which are inside the wings, it's a major overhaul of the aircraft, which is already hideously expensive. Over the weekend, it came on out. There was another F-35 that exploded during takeoff, and they have determined the entire A series of the F-35, all of the F-35s made so far have this insulation problem.
Mike, they don't even care about our junky weapons, All they want to do is start the war and hide. They don't care who wins or loses, as long as they go in the little bunkers and hide and, like you said, come out when everything's over.
The bankers that are behind all this, they don't care which side wins or loses. They make money off of both sides. I mean, that's why Brown Brothers Harriman in New York was financing Adolf Hitler's rise to power right up to the day war broke out, at which point Roosevelt hit them with the Trading with the Enemies Act. But the bankers, they love war. War is the bankers' richest harvest. It forces countries and people into hideous amounts of unpayable debt to make them the slaves to the bankers for the next 100 years. And they really don't care which side wins or loses. They come out on top no matter who wins, who loses, and they're getting ready to do it again.
There's got to be. I mean, we know who the players are. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and there's got to be a way where someone can just seek them out and.
Well, they own the government. I mean, these people own the government. Our politicians. I mean, these are people who would sell their own mother for $1. So yeah, the rich and powerful are above the law. We saw that with Hillary Clinton, when FBI Director James Comey literally let her slide on felony violations of Title 18 on this absurd claim that he didn't think she meant to do wrong, even though Title 18, Section 793 clearly says exposure of U.S. national secrets through negligence is good for 10 years in prison. That's what happened. When you're that rich, nobody touches you. The government won't touch you because you own the government. What was it, last week, who was it came out on and said that the Federal Reserve is actually above the level of the president?
Which is true.
Well, it's not supposed to be that way.
No, it isn't. No. It's they got a hand in every part of the government, every judicial system. I mean, it's like they say, it's a machine that's got control of everything. And hopefully if Trump does get elected, at least he can take care of a little at a time, maybe.
Well, he's going to have a lot of people out here willing to help him do it, and I'd be available for a position in the Trump administration if he's at all interested, or if he even knows that I'm out here. Anyway, listen, Steve in Massachusetts need to let you go, and we're going to switch to John in Missouri. And John, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. But what's on your mind?
My question was, why does the United States dislike Syria so much?
It doesn't dislike Syria. Syria was just on the pathway to the U.S. attempt to dollarifize the Middle Eastern oil countries. General Wesley Clark blew the lid off of this back, I think it was in 2005, and said the U.S. agenda was to conquer or regime change all of the oil-producing nations in the Middle East so that they would sell their oil and gas only for the U.S. dollar, which would increase foreign demand for the U.S. dollar and keep it propped up because even back then, reasons to have the U.S. dollar to trade with were drying up. It's all about keeping the dollar's hegemonic domination of the global currency, and Syria just happens to be in the way. Syria is the last stepping stone before the much-desired war in Iran.
Does Syria not use the dollar for its oil?
Syria uses whatever currency the people buying the oil and gas want to have, and more importantly, Assad refused to allow a pipeline right-of-way so that Israel could take the oil and gas they're stealing from under the Golan Heights, which is part of Syria, and sell it to Europe. And that was the point at which they started seriously talking about regime change.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to, actually, we're going to take a commercial break, and then we got another phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phones here, rather interesting little development. The Federal Election Commission is refusing to say whether or not it is against the rules for presidential candidates to wear radio earpieces. So at this point, it's a given that Hillary will indeed have one. Talk about corrupt. I don't think the American voters want to make their decision about the election based on who is in the back room with the microphone or how many of them there are. The whole point of a debate is to take the measure of the candidates themselves, not their advisory committee. And the fact that the Federal Election Commission is refusing to answer this question about whether it's illegal or not, I think is telegraphing that, yes, Hillary is going to, in fact, be doing that as well. All right, let's take a phone call. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I don't think Hillary would ever use one of those. First of all, she doesn't need it. She's the smartest woman in the world. In fact, probably the smartest individual in the world, and according to President Barack Obama, the single most qualified person in America to be president. So I don't think that's an issue at all.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was wondering, back in 2009, best I can recall, it was around maybe the 9th of January 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I was eating a sandwich, and I very rarely listen to Rush Limbaugh, but for some reason that day I turned him on to see what he was talking about. It's the new year, 2009, and all of a sudden he goes on this rant. I call it the New World Order rant, and I'm thinking, okay, he's saying this in jest. He's joking. He's making fun of conspiracy theorists and everything. He talks about how the U.S. Congress and the U.S. president is just they're ceremonial, and that there's these shadow people behind the curtain that actually run everything. And I thought he was joking, and I was waiting for the punchline, and there never was one. He broke away, went to a regular commercial break, came back. I kept waiting for him to expound on what he had just said, and he never mentioned it again. And I actually listened as much as I could for the next several days just to see if he would say anything more about it, or if a caller would ask him, "Hey, Rush, what were you talking about?" Not one. It was like it never happened.
Yeah, somebody talked to him during
the. Anybody remember that?
I don't remember that one, but I remember out here in Hawaii, there's a local station, KHVH, and there's a talk host in the morning, and I'm blanking on his name. I used to listen to him a lot, and he teased the fact that he was going to be talking about this whole situation in Mena, Arkansas, and the cocaine smuggling and everything on the next day's show. And the next day's show, they were playing a rerun, and the day after that, he was back and never mentioned it again. So, yeah, and of course, the KHVH is owned by Clear Channel. And they absolutely yank the strings of anybody who dares cross the lines.
I was considering the possibility
Rick
that
Hamada, that's his name.
Okay. I was considering the possibility maybe Rush was engaged in some contractual dispute, and he was trying to scare them or something like that. You know, another time, this has just been a few years ago, I remember I was in line at the drive-thru at the bank, and Rush Limbaugh started talking about, you know that phones don't work above, X number of feet. And he kept making the point, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's trying to tell his audience about 9/11.
Yep.
He's trying to tell them. And it was just, it's very, very odd. But, anyway, I don't listen to the guy. He's a clown to me, but there's a couple of times I just wonder if anybody had heard Rush Limbaugh's New World Order speech. He sounded like one of us. And he sounded like he was an RBN host talking about the New World Order. He was explaining it in detail, how it all worked, everything. So,
well,
right.
He got his leash yanked good and hard, and it does happen. It does happen. All right. Well, listen, Frank, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, as I mentioned before, there are growing indications that the war party, the war hawks, are in open rebellion against the civilian government. And there is an article that came out of Sputnik News about how the DOD openly saying that it may or may not obey Obama if there is any kind of an attempt at reconciliation with Russia. I mean, that's mutiny right there. And this bombing of the Syrian army may have been a bit of chest thumping as to who's really in control of America's war policy. We'll be right back after these few words. America, welcome back to the show. We're talking about events in Syria, and of course Samantha Powers is up at the United Nations screaming about the humanitarian crisis that's been caused by the bombing of the UN aid convoy, which more and more is looking like it was a ground attack and was done as a false flag to blame on Russia to try and counter the negative propaganda flashback from the U.S. attack on Syria's armed forces. But the humanitarian crisis is being caused by the U.S.-backed rebels. They have shut off the water for 1.5 million civilians. And collective punishment of civilians is a war crime. The U.S. is deploying additional forces to 7 bases in northern Syria. And again, they are doing that without the permission of the Syrian government. I think that qualifies technically as an invasion. Now, here's an interesting little article. This came out of accessoflogic.com. Why Assad's army has not defected. Because 4 years ago, when the U.S. was first going in there to try and get Assad, everybody was saying, oh, in a few weeks he's going to be gone. His army will desert him. His military will desert him. It's all over but the shouting. And here we are 4 years later, and Assad's army has not defected. And the reality is that the U.S. was guilty of believing its own propaganda, that Assad was not well liked, that his people were ready to turn on him. And the Syria's people, they understand what life is going to be like under a U.S. puppet ruler, because they've seen it already happen in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya. And they don't want that for themselves or for their children. In a lot of ways, it's a repeat of the disaster at the Bay of Pigs, where the CIA was telling John F. Kennedy that the Cuban people hated Fidel Castro, that all we needed to do was arm the Cuban brigades and put them on the shore, and the Cuban people would dash down to the beach and help the Cuban brigades overthrow Fidel Castro. And so Kennedy gave the go-ahead. They landed the Cuban brigades at the Bay of Pigs, and the Cuban people ran right on down to the beach and pounded those Cuban brigades into the sand, sending an unequivocal message that Fidel Castro was far preferable to having another U.S. puppet run their country, because they remembered how bad things had been under Batista, who was the last U.S. puppet that was there. All right, let's go ahead and grab some more phone calls. Mark in North Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, I might disagree with you a little bit on this Syria thing, because it seems to me like the military does not want to get involved now, because I see that General Mumford, or whether, the head of the Joint Chiefs, the Marine General, he basically said, if you put a no-fly zone in there, like it looks like a lot of the civilian leadership want to do, you're going to have a war with Syria and Russia. And
well, he didn't say anything to indicate that isn't what they actually want, is to provoke a confrontation with Russia. And let's be honest here. The United States does not have a legal right to declare a no-fly zone over another sovereign nation.
Oh, I know that.
Okay.
I realize that. We don't have a legal right to have any troops in Syria right now, or bomb any part of Syria. If they just do it, the might makes right type thing.
Yes.
That's what's so dangerous. But I think a lot of the civilians, like the State Department, the CIA, that's what's really behind it. Because this Samantha Power, right?
Yes.
She was one of she was one of the horsewomen of the apocalypse that, was for taking out, Gaddafi there in, Libya.
Yes.
Her, Susan Rice, and Mr. Slick Willie herself.
And Victoria Nuland. Don't forget Victoria Nuland.
Victoria Nuland. I forgot. How can I forget that witch?
Mm-hmm.
How can I forget that witch? But, these people are playing evil. I'm not going to blame the military in this thing. Because I think the military I think what the military should do is they should mutiny and say, you know what? Enough is enough. We're not going to do this. We're not going to bomb anybody. We're not going to, we're going to get our troops out of here, or if we do have to stay here, we're not going to lift a finger, unless we're actually attacked. We have enough of this. That's what I think the military should do.
Well, the rank and file military are very much of that mind. It's the high command that are getting very rich off of kickbacks from defense contracts, and they're looking forward to putting in their 20 in the Pentagon, and then double dip with a pension and a huge salary from these defense contractors they've been handing the contracts to. But the reason that cartel is pushing for more war in order to get more military spending. I mean, we have the same Pentagon that's already admitted they misplaced $6 trillion, is now demanding another $1 trillion of your money in order to achieve parity with Russia and China. And we're never going to do that no matter how much money is spent, because the way that money is spent is what is leading to disasters like the F-35, the F-22, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships, and the aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, which they're already admitting may never actually be suitable to a real combat environment.
Mike, I just got one other question for you. Yeah, because you talk about the Cold War and all that.
Yes.
Do you think the Soviet Union was as bad as they were made out to be, or do you think that was also a bunch of propaganda?
I think that was a bunch of propaganda. The reason Russia was being demonized was because of the communist revolution, which was seen as a threat to capitalism in this country, which is where we all work and the money junkies get all the money, as opposed to the communist system where everybody works equally and they share in that wealth. And there was literally a real fear that the communist revolution could actually spread to the United States. A workers' revolt saying, we're doing the work, we deserve a larger stress of the, or larger share of the proceeds from it. But, capitalism is this system, and there's a very thin line between capitalism and fascism, and our country's gone over that.
What do you, by the way, how about as far as the Man of Steel, Stalin? Do you think he was really as evil and stuff as they make him out to be, or do you think that's also,
It's hard to know. We'd have to go back and look. I mean, he did some really stupid things. There's no question that he had these purges. Lysenkoism was as badly botched a case of politics over scientific reality as human-caused global warming is today.
What about his time how being a butcher, that he literally murdered millions of his own people? You believe that, or you think that's, again, that might be made up?
It may be exaggerated, but look at the U.S. government and how many of its own people it's murdered. Look at Waco. Look at all the Wounded Knee and the rest of it. We don't really know. The only thing that we know for certain is we live under a government that lies to us about absolutely everything. Prudence says we should not accept at face value anything we've ever been told by the government, by the corporate media, by the state-controlled schools. It's all probably a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement.
Because, I watch these old stuff on YouTube about the marches that the Russians finally defeated the Nazis in World War II and all that. And it looks to me like those people, Stalin was, of course, in charge at the time. Looks to me like those people really loved Stalin at the time. It didn't look to me like it was just a put on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just like the troops are not deserting from Assad, the Russian people united behind Stalin to defeat the Nazi invasion. And I think at this point, no ruler in history is either as good as that we're told or as bad as we're told. Like I said, looking back to the 1980s and that gun-running operation in Nicaragua, we're seeing then Vice President, later President, basically involved in drug running for personal profitability. Right. We know that George W. Bush lied to Congress to start the war with Iraq. And I think what we need to look at is getting rid of the idea of good or evil and start saying, how many of these people are sociopathic? And how much damage is a sociopathic leadership going to do to a country? And I think this is a major reason why the Founding Fathers tried to design a government where authority was diffused across the entire nation as much as possible, because they understood centralized power becomes a very tempting target, and it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. And so they tried to design a system that would limit that damage.
Also, let's not forget what George Washington said.
Beware foreign entanglements.
Yeah, exactly. If we heeded that, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems we have today. Mm-hmm. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the worst foreign entanglement for our country has been Israel. They have siphoned vast sums of money out of our pockets, and all we get back for it is demands that we suspend the First Amendment, because we're not allowed to say anything bad about Israel. And we find out that Israel's leadership is one of the biggest liars in all of history. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We got a bunch of phone calls, and I want to get to before the top of the hour. So we're going to switch over to Tom in Utah. Thank you for waiting very, very patiently, and what's on your mind?
You can hear me. You can hear me okay?
You are on the air, sir.
Okay. A friend told me to call in. I apologize. I was assaulted in D.C., so I've been left blind.
Ouch.
And they're very friendly folks that kind of what do you call it? Taken over the constitutional government that our forefathers set.
Yes.
Anyway, it's an issue that the Clintons are involved with. I didn't realize that I was poking a stick into the hornet's nest.
Mm-hmm. I know that feeling.
Before Hillary twice, and did not know that she was party to the act, the criminal behavior that I was exposing. But in a nutshell, this, and by the way, this impacts veterans because the VA was going to take advantage of an offer by the Clintons to house the homeless vets. I was one of the scientists that were brought down to New Orleans after Katrina, and I identified the poisoning problems in those FEMA trailers. Well, right now, even those trailers that were condemned by our testimony, the Clintons have been trying to pawn them off onto the veterans, the Native Americans, the unsuspecting whites. As well, they were trying to pawn them off onto the Haitians through the Clinton Foundation's, charitable acts towards the Haitian earthquake victims. And I know this is kind of off the cuff and you haven't seen it before, but anybody listening, and you can see the work done by others on the disclosure of the poisoning in those FEMA trailers. But then I came down and explained why they were continuing to poison people long after the formaldehyde should have off-gassed. It's in a website called Gassing America, aka poisoningthepoor.com. Either one, Gassing America or Poisoning the Poor, or Infanticide USA will get you the same place. I put it together in a soft version. By the way, the Trump people are already talking to me about it. This is a evil in your face, in plain sight, so to speak, and anybody can go out. And this is bizarre. You probably won't buy it right off the top. But in 1976, you got to remember who was Secretary of State in 1976 and 1974. He pulled together a group of men, and they took the entire manufactured and mobile home industry, put them under the control of HUD. And since that date, every single manufactured mobile home violates code. No city or county or state health and safety agency would ever permit what HUD has done.
Well, it was done to save money so they could make a cheaper product and foist it off. I mean, we know that in addition to those mobile homes that no sane person would want to be living in and be exposed to because of the hazardous materials used in the construction. We remember when the Clintons, when they were in Arkansas and they were behind this blood harvesting program where they literally were harvesting blood from prisoners with HIV, which was then used to make a clotting factor for hemophiliacs, and that went out there and made a lot of people sick. There was a story that came out only 2 weeks ago where the Clinton Foundation was donating medications down to Haiti, and the medications turned out to be diluted to almost the point of uselessness. And it's all about, saving money, making more money, profitability. And we've seen so many examples where there will be a product out there that is dangerous, hazardous, very poorly made, and all the manufacturer needs to do is make the right donations to the right politicians, and it'll be declared mandatory. Everybody will be forced to buy the product, and we're seeing that now with vaccines and GMO, and because it's all about maximizing the profit from the targeted population, which in this case happens to be the American people.
Well, I'm going to add one more slant to that.
Okay.
Since I have labored in medicine, if you're going to poison people for 40 years now, how do you get away with it? Because if people are being injured, just like when I went to New Orleans, the deputy sheriff invited me down there to help them with that, understand that issue in New Orleans after Katrina. Not one single federally directed medical professional ever told any of those individuals that they were being poisoned with formaldehyde or carbon monoxide, which is another one.
No, they come down sick, and then all of a sudden they become customers to the medical industrial complex. Our medical industrial complex needs the American people to be constantly, chronically sick from something, whether it's something used in the manufacture of their shoes or those motorhomes, or something that's in the food. If the American people all of a sudden became healthy, that entire multi-billion-dollar medical industrial complex would collapse. And they are very generous donors every election season.
That's why I left that profession, is because within a few years, I began to realize it was not about mercy, but about mercenary. And when I was approached I was retired. I'm 75 now. But I was long approached after I was, quote, happily away from all of that. But I had a mother and a grandmother at my door, and they came to me and pled with me, please save our family. The Child Protective Services and the medical people were accusing the family of abuse and neglect. They'd had one baby die, and another baby was in the throes of death. And they came to me, and that started me back into this battle against my own profession. And then 8 years ago, a family contacted me with a baby near death, and I identified the real cause, which was carbon monoxide and formaldehyde. They always come in a package, by the way.
I know they do because of the way formaldehyde works. I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials.
Well, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew the website to go to, gasingamerica.com.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to let you go because we got to take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and grab another phone call. Ernest in Reno, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. I've been listening to you for a while, and I really like what you do. I respect what you and your wife do. And I just make a comment on Limbaugh and Hannity and people like that. Those are mainstream conservatives. They will go to a certain line, and they will not pass it. They've tried it, and they know what's on the other side, and they're afraid. That's why, guys like you, I really have a lot of respect for.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I prefer not to call them the mainstream media anymore. I call them the corporate media because looking at the recent readership numbers, viewership numbers for the TV news, we're the mainstream here. And I like to call what we're doing the independent media because we don't have large corporate structures over us that can call up and say, stop talking about Hillary Clinton or Israel or you'll be fired. And that's really what makes us independent, is that we're allowed to, we have the freedom to talk about the issues that need to be talked about.
Unfortunately, the masses recognize them as this is what's really happening. I mean, back 20 years ago when the Chinagate thing came out with Laurel and Clinton and the technology transfers, that the people were just told these are just transfers between strategic partners. And to me, this was treason. But the masses will just, whatever the mainstream conservative says, that's what they'll accept that. And
well, that was true. That was true back in the mid-1990s. It's not true anymore. Poll after poll is showing that the American people don't trust what they're seeing in the corporate media anymore. They're very skeptical, and that's a healthy sign because the skeptical people are a free people.
Right. But I just hope it's not too late that they wake up. But anyway, the reason why I called is I noticed that you don't like to go to that aspect of the spiritual or element as far as what's going on in the world today. But I just wanted to make a point that if we go to Israel and why does Israel have so much influence in the world today, we have to look at basically the Bible has effective control of the three major religions of the world, that Islam, the Jews, and the Christians all consider Abraham to be, their patriarch.
Yes.
And so that's the reason why, if the God of this world is the Hebrew God, and he's able to convince these masses of people this is God, well, that makes sense. That tells you, and they're able to manufacture their re-emergence into the world. I mean, that tells you that there is something besides just what you see that's controlling this. And that God of the world.
Well, we know, let me cut you off because we're almost at our station break. Every ruler tries to exploit religion for their political agenda. But ultimately, it is the rulers who are setting in motion the events that change our lives. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And interestingly enough, people who are outside the venue for tonight's debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are reporting that Hofstra University has posted signs warning that there could be trigger events in the presidential debate. The event conducted just beyond the sign may contain triggering or sensitive material. In other words, they're being very, very PC. All right, let's go to Ed in Michigan. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How's it going?
Going fine.
I just wondered, have you heard from Julian Assange said that there was going to be something really big that came out before the first debate?
Didn't happen. He's got like 3 hours left to go before the debate begins. And it didn't happen.
Okay.
Maybe his price got met.
Well, I know they're reviewing quite a bit of stuff, so let's hope that something big comes out real soon.
Well, one thing that's always bothered me about... Hang on, let me finish. One thing that's always bothered me about WikiLeaks is the way they tease their revelations and their dumps. And it's one of the reasons why I think it may actually be a bit of an extortion racket masquerading as a whistleblowing website. Because if you have information on somebody like Hillary Clinton that could possibly put her in prison, you don't announce it ahead of time, because then you wind up dead with 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head, declared a suicide. Okay,
right.
You just release it. Huh? You just release the information. Once it's out there, revenge is a very expensive luxury. When you look at all the dead bodies that have accumulated around the Clintons throughout the years, these were all people who had information that needed to be kept hidden from the American people, like Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown.
Yeah, that week, my good friend of mine and I have been talking about that for the last couple of weeks. One other thing, and it's a little bit, it's off the subject of this and that, but I only saw it one time, but as one of the towers, it was either Tower 1 or Tower 2, was actually coming down, somebody got, it was a real short video, and it almost looked like one of the towers actually lifted up and went like 5 to 10 feet to one side. It actually looked like the whole thing moved like 5 or 10 feet, and that was as the tower was coming down. And whoever the photographer was, I was like thinking that they were probably going to be killed.
Well, there's something you need to understand about the way demolition charges are placed in buildings, and we have photos of the load-bearing members of the World Trade Towers showing the marks of these demolition charges. They're basically placed on a diagonal line so that once the cutter charge fires, the weight of the building will push the beams apart along that diagonal. So, yes, the top part of the building is going to shift to one side during the first part of that controlled demolition. Makes perfect sense.
Right. That's what I've only seen it once. I think it was on a video that said, it was like newly discovered video. Mm-hmm. And it looks like, and it's the front doors, it's the bottom of the tower, and it's as the thing is already halfway coming down towards the ground, and it actually looks like the whole building shifts like 10 feet to the right in the video.
Well, there's another factor to keep in mind there, and that is that when the towers came down, there was a huge volume of air trapped inside. As the floors would pancake and it's coming on down, you're going to see a lot of air blowing out through shattered windows and the doors and the lobby, and everything's going to be in motion. Anyway, listen, Ed, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And by the way, at this point regarding 9/11, we all know we got lied to by the government, and that's really all we need to deal with right now. We don't need to go over the fine details of what moved and when. That's what the government wants us to do, is constantly argue over minutia and the poison the well disinformation like the plane at the Pentagon. It's time to move past that. We can all agree the government lied to us about 9/11. Let us unite together and decide, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about a government that lies to us about such things? And do we really want the next generation of young Americans to grow up enslaved to a government that lies to them, to take their wealth, to send them off to wars of conquest? I can't imagine any responsible parent wanting their children to grow up in the current circumstance that our nation finds itself in. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And we're in hour number 3, and we're still in the war zone agenda. I'm way behind on my talking points. I'm going to have to take most of them into tomorrow. Now, following the first Russian phase of supporting Bashar al-Assad, they deployed Su-25SM attack aircraft. And then during the pullback, when they were trying to say, well, we've done with the terrorists and we're trying to calm the situation down, they pulled them out. Now they're apparently back, and that's adding quite a bit of air power to support the Syrian army in what looks like it's the final push to just clear Aleppo out of all of these terrorists. Aleppo is their last stronghold. When Aleppo is taken back from the U.S.-supported terrorists, that's pretty much the end of the game, and the U.S. government's going to have this generation's version of Vietnam on their hands. A stunning military defeat that could derail the entire war agenda. Now, as I mentioned before, Samantha Powers is up at the United Nations trying to put the guilt back on Russia, saying Russia is guilty of war crimes. Russia is guilty of war crimes. And yet, it's the U.S.-backed terrorists in Aleppo that have shut off the water to 1.5 million people. That's a war crime right there. And the U.S. is kind of raising on a busted flush here because they're out there saying, well, we know Russia did the attack on the UN convoy. We know Russia shot down MH17. We know Russia stole Crimea. And they're getting deeper and deeper into this delusional world that is completely unconnected with reality. And to show you just how completely over the top this is getting, Samantha Power just came on out and said Russia and Assad are bombing Syrian civilians just for kicks. They're just having fun going on out there. And that is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard in my life for two reasons. One, neither Russia nor Syria have a motive for bombing their own civilians, knowing that if documented and proven, it provides fodder for the U.S. propaganda machine. Second of all, they're in a war. And in a war, munitions and supplies pour through your hands like water. You don't have anything to waste. And again, Russia has released photos of the UN humanitarian convoy that do not show indications of an air attack. In fact, more and more, it's looking like this convoy was set on fire by a Hellfire missile, which is carried by the Predator drone. And it's been confirmed there was a U.S. Predator drone right over the convoy when it exploded. Okay. All right, getting on back here. The West is still arming al-Nusra in Syria. They're making peace impossible. As long as you continue to pour in weapons and attack the foreign troops, peace is going to be impossible. And apparently, militants from Arar al-Sham have had the cover blown off a plan to launch yet another chemical attack on civilians and blame it on Assad. They've already tried to do this a couple of times, tried to claim that Bashar al-Assad was using sarin gas on his own people. Really? Why? Why would he do that? These were Alawites, some of his strongest supporters. And this gas attack took place right in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they arrived, and the U.S. was out there. See, it proves Assad is gassing his own people, just like Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, and there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, and the Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and the Lusitania wasn't carrying any weapons, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors said, no, this attack was done by the rebels to frame Assad with. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Now, Samantha Powers is out there demanding that Russia be removed from the Security Council. We can't have Russia in there defending themselves. We can't have Russia coming in and messing up our agenda with the facts. We have to kick them out. Now, timelines become very important when you're looking at developments going on over there. NATO has continued to expand its missile potential in Europe. Moscow is understandably concerned. This is their border. NATO's coming up to the border with Russia and putting in nuclear-capable missiles. Because Russia's the aggressor, don't you know? Now, Putin, trying to send a message that you don't want to go there, is deploying the RS-24 Yars missile system on their side of the border. This is a nuclear-tipped missile, 10 MIRVs per launching device. Very, very portable. And, of course, the corporate media in the U.S. is saying, see, Russia's being belligerent. They're moving their missiles up. But look at the timeline. Russia moved their missiles up after NATO did. Like I said, this is a replay of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everybody was out there saying, oh, Khrushchev put missiles in Cuba. How very, very provocative. And what you were never taught in your school, what you were never told by the corporate media, is that Khrushchev sent the missiles to Cuba because the U.S. was putting nuclear missiles in Turkey aimed at Russia. So once again, the U.S. kicks off an escalation, and this is, oh, it's all Russia's fault. Really, they're the bad. You must hate them. You must love your government and be willing to die for it, and you must hate the Russians. Now, Tony Blair was interviewed in the Sunday Telegraph and said he was very sorry for the inquiries into British soldiers' misconduct in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you need to be careful. He's not apologizing for the misconduct. He's just very, very sorry that there were any investigations. Because Great Britain, Tony Blair certainly, seems to feel that they should be able to commit war crimes with impunity. Because after all, Israel gets away with it. The U.S. gets away with it. The U.S. is now admitting using white phosphorus munitions in Iraq. And white phosphorus is banned by international treaty except for the generation of smokescreens. But we have seen U.S. white phosphorus weapons falling onto people. It's an incendiary. You can burn up residential areas with it. They've been using it in Iraq. Saudi Arabia has been using U.S.-supplied white phosphorus munitions against the people of Yemen. We know who the aggressor is. And when they step over that line to using these banned weapons, and I think you could probably agree that white phosphorus is a chemical weapon, it shows how close they realize they are to defeat and losing this whole world war agenda that they're on. Meanwhile, Britain has been accused of trying to block the United Nations inquiry into alleged war crimes committed by Saudi Arabia in Yemen. So they're already in cover-up mode on this stuff. As I mentioned earlier in the show, one of the things that we get back from Israel in exchange for all these billions and billions of dollars we've been forced to give them, something like, I think it's up to 20 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program has been taken from you, the American people, and given to Israel. And we are still waiting for a giant leap for mankind or even an improved version of Velcro. But one thing that we constantly get back from Israel is requests for more money. Lindsey Graham was already out there saying $38 billion isn't enough. We need to give them more. You cancel that school construction. You shut that hospital down. We need to give that money to Israel. And, of course, Israel's continuing demands to end the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, especially on college campuses, to silence criticism of the government of Israel. Now, the First Amendment exists to give us the right to recognize our right to criticize the actions of government, any government. And Israel's absolutely opposed to that. They think you should just sign those checks and shut the heck up. But Israel has gone so far and been so abusive on America's college campuses that even pro-Israel organizations are saying it's gone too far. And Israel is only making itself look bad by this constant attack on the right of freedom of speech. Because you can't go on sucking vast sums of money out of the United States of America at the same time you're seen as attacking some of its foundation principles. Now, getting back on to Charlotte, this appears to have been a lot of outside agitation. Police are saying 70% of the arrested protesters had out-of-state IDs. They were being brought in. It wasn't Charlotte having a protest. It was outside agitators brought in to riot, to fan up race hatred for Hillary's advantage in the election. Apparently over on MSNBC, Chuck Todd was interviewing April Ryan of American Urban Radio Networks, who came on out and said the vast majority of criminal suspects who were killed by police in 2015 were black. And that's an outright falsehood. And she actually cited the Washington Post as the source for this claim. But what the Washington Post actually found is twice as many whites as blacks were killed by police in 2015 because of all this concern over media backlash for killing a black suspect. Go ahead and kill a white one. Story coming out of Investment Watchdog. One of the protesters in Charlotte, live on Fox News, came on out and said, white lives don't matter. That's why we're opposed to all lives matter. No, only black lives matter. And I want to hammer home a point. You do not end racism by being racist. You do not end injustice by being unjust. All lives matter is a valid point of view. And these agitators that are down there in Charlotte saying black lives matter but white lives don't, they're there to cause trouble. Now, Al Sharpton, who never met a race riot he couldn't exploit, literally came on out on a radio interview saying that there should be a law in this country to make it a crime for any white person to shoot a black person, even if it's in self-defense. That's how over the top this has gone. Al Sharpton is saying, if you are a white person and you are being attacked, robbed, raped by a black person, and you shoot them in self-defense, you should still go to jail. Now, I wonder what Al thinks should happen when a black criminal attacks a black victim, because most blacks who are killed, it's done to them by other blacks in the inner city gangs. But I mean, that's how completely ridiculous and over the top this is. This idea that white people don't have a right to legally defend themselves against black criminals. This is from Al Sharpton. Why is anybody still listening to this guy? Why does he get a forum in the corporate media? Now, getting on to the Cascade Mall shootings, when it first came on out, the media was saying the shooter was Hispanic. People looking at the video were saying, no, he looks like Middle Eastern, one of the refugees. And the establishment said, oh, you're being racist, you're being anti-immigrant, you're being anti-refugee. He's Hispanic. Well, they finally arrested the guy, and yes, he's a Turkish Muslim. And more than that, he's a Hillary Clinton supporter. So we're going to take a break now for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, there's been an interesting development over that New York City bomber, because it's come on out that the FBI knew this guy was a potential terrorist all the way back in 2014, and they didn't do anything. Now, obviously, this undermines this whole total information awareness agenda of the U.S. government to spy on us all to protect us all from terrorism. It didn't work, did it? But I think the most likely conclusion is that this bomber was an FBI informant who was set up and used as a patsy. And for those of you listening to this show who are FBI informants, you remember this, because that loyalty that the FBI demands from you is a one-way street. And if they need a convenient dead body, it could very easily be you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Moody's has now downgraded Turkey's credit to junk status, warning of an economic crisis there. This is a story I really love. There's a yogurt company, Chobani, that has just taken 10% of the ownership of that company and distributed it among the employees, some of whom became overnight millionaires. It was an average of $150,000 per employee. It was divided up based on how long they'd been at the company and what their position within the company was. That's a very, very generous thing to do. Those are going to be very loyal, dedicated workers from now on. Now, over in Dallas, they're having a problem with their police force because all of a sudden dozens of officers are taking early retirement so that they can get their pensions, because the long-term viability of the pension fund was damaged by what they're politely referring to as high-risk investments. Now, what they mean, of course, is the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud, because by law, pension funds are not allowed to invest in high-risk investments. They're only allowed to invest in AAA-rated investments, which are safe. They don't have a huge amount of return, but they're safe and they're going to be there. Now, when the mortgage-backed security fraud was happening, Wall Street's pet rating agencies rated these mortgage-backed bundles as AAA, and pension funds all across the country bought into them. The fraud collapsed, and that's why pensions all over this country are now in trouble. But nobody's got the courage to stand up and point the finger or blame it Wall Street. Oh, the workers are living too long. They're demanding too much. Always blame the victim, blame the victim. Now, over at Wells Fargo, two former employees, Alexander Polonsky and Brian Zaghi, have filed a lawsuit for $2.6 billion. It's a class action lawsuit on behalf of workers who were basically forced to create fraudulent accounts or be fired. They were apparently under pressure to churn this stuff out at the risk of their jobs. And I hope they win. Now, over in Germany, Deutsche Bank is in serious, serious trouble. Angela Merkel has ruled out a government bailout of Deutsche Bank. That may be a little bit of blowback from when Deutsche Bank interceded in the gold repatriation issue and stood up and said to the German government, the German people, you don't need your gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. They're a private central bank just like we are, and we trust them implicitly that they have not played fast and loose with your gold. And then we found out, of course, that's exactly what happened. But Deutsche Bank is facing billions in fines from the U.S., billions in lawsuits from within Europe itself. And if they're not getting a taxpayer-funded bailout, their next step will be a Cyprus-style haircut. And I expect that Germans who have savings accounts in Deutsche Bank are already closing them and emptying them out. And their stock hit a record low today. In fact, the stock market has not had a very good day. It started in Asia last night. And of course, here in the U.S., the corporate media is blaming it all on Donald Trump. The fear of a Trump presidency is what's crashing the U.S. stock market. If you want your stock portfolio to go on up, you will vote for Hillary Clinton. Well, how many people actually still have a stock portfolio? It's not very many. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. Deutsche Bank's stock price is taking a major pounding, and it looks like the speculators are already moving in. There was something like 200 million euros of shorts put in over the last week. Story coming out of Zero Hedge. It all has a very 2008 feel to it. They're starting to draw parallels between Deutsche Bank and Lehman Brothers. Now, Warren Buffett has amassed a $70 billion cash pool. He's clearly anticipating there's a crash coming, which will represent a buy opportunity to buy up assets for pennies on the dollars, and he's getting positioned to do that. So are a lot of the other billionaires, along with grabbing as much physical metal as they can. And you should be doing exactly the same thing. You should be buying physical silver, physical gold. Least expensive way you can get in is go on out to various online websites and look for what's called junk silver. These are the pre-1965 U.S. coins that actually had metal content that was worth something. Quarters, dimes, nickels, even the pure copper pennies have value. And they're called junk because these are coins that do not have numismatic value. Never buy for numismatic value or collectability. Those things are matters of fashion. They come and they go. You basically want to buy and sell on the spot price, or as close to it as you can, in small amounts so nobody's keeping a record, and keep it under your own control. Because the laws have already been written that in a crisis, a bank can go into the safety deposit boxes of its customers and loot them at will. So can the U.S. government. Do not get involved in the paper trade for silver and gold. It's way over leveraged, and at some point, there's going to be a run on that, and it's going to be in serious, serious trouble. Now, over at The Intercept, they've got a multi-part story. The first episode is The Money Is Gone, and you need to follow this thing through the various segments, parts, to read it. And it's a little bit long, but it's a story about a guy named Chris DiOrio, who was a middle-class investor who lost a huge amount of money on what are called the penny stocks, the pink sheets. And in the process of trying to find out what happened, he discovered that even with their junk status, a lot of the big Wall Street players have been playing with the penny stocks. And that there was an epidemic of naked short selling going on. Now, in a short sale, you borrow shares from a broker for a small fee, and you go on out and you sell them into the marketplace, and you're betting that the stock price is going to go down so that you can buy the issues of stock back at a lower price, return them to the broker that you borrowed them from, and keep the difference. Now, naked short selling is going on out and selling stock without actually having the certificates. And for most people, ordinary people, it's illegal. But the large market makers have an exemption. They're allowed to do naked short selling, in theory, to maintain liquidity in markets. Because if people want to buy a stock and there's no more of it left, then the system starts to lock up. But the ability to be doing naked short selling means you can manipulate that stock price. If you buy a stock in XYZ and you're able to issue naked shorts on it, you can drive that price down and make a huge amount of money. And you can drive legitimate businesses out of business doing this. So this is a very interesting article to read. And it's just another indication of how our entire financial system is surviving on fraud. Because the regular, real economy has locked up. There are no high-paying jobs. People aren't going to the stores to buy things. Manufacturers aren't able to sell goods. It's already in its death throes. Nobody wants to admit it because, after all, there's an election coming on up. All right, let's grab a phone call. Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how's your Monday going so far?
Well, so far, so good. You know, counting on down to that debate.
Yeah. You know, I've been studying a lot the whole topic of body doubles, and I just want to point out that the Clintons are puppets, and they not only have their own hundreds of millions of dollars of resources, and not only her own access to classified information, which could include access to classified technologies, particularly classified technologies about cloning humans or body double or types of technologies and surgeries. My point being is that there may be a bunch of Hillary clones running around there that we've actually gotten used to already.
Send in the clones. There have to be clones. All right, well, there's a flaw in your theory. Okay, there's a flaw in your theory. You can clone Hillary Clinton and you will get a much younger version. There's no way to accelerate the aging. Okay. Second of all, Hillary Clinton has a lifetime of corrupting political experience that shapes her language and her behavior. You can't clone that and transfer it into a copy. So we know that Hillary uses doubles when she has to be seen from a distance, but there is no way they could put a double up at the debate tonight. There's no way they could put in a double any place where Hillary's going to be seen close up or has to speak on issues of policy. That is just not possible at this point. Okay?
Well, hold on. I disagree. I think that with, like for voice, just think of some of the best stand-up comedians doing voices of famous people. Right there, you can get a dead ringer going. And then the reason I mentioned about classified technologies and hundreds of millions of dollars at disposal is how do we know that there's not a way of accelerating a clone or cloning something at a later date?
Okay, Mateus, let me back up here a little bit. Let me back up here a little tiny bit, okay? First of all, with regard to Hillary's voice, it's not her voice that is the issue, it's what she's saying. Second of all, there are impressionists who literally have work in Hollywood coming on in and replacing damaged audio recordings for film. Frank Gorshin used to do that a lot. But the thing is, that works on the audience when they don't realize that there's a slightly different voice for this one particular line. Just like people didn't notice it was a double because they didn't know it was to look for it, that it was going to be there. Now that we're all alerted to the possibility of deception, it's going to be much, much harder to do. As far as speculating about creating clones for her, again, where that falls apart is you cannot copy the memory and mind from one to the other, especially with the Parkinson's being an issue. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch to Janice in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Janice, are you there? Okay.
I just wanted to comment. Yeah, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. I just wanted to comment. You said that junk silver is the cheapest way to buy silver, and actually right now it's not. I'm a precious metals dealer, and the premium over spot for junk silver has been pretty high the last year. It's come down some. A year ago it was $7 or $8 an ounce, so it was definitely a bad deal then. It's come down. It's around, $3 or so an ounce over spot now. But if you get privately minted 1 ounce silver rounds, and one company makes half ounce silver rounds, 1 ounce silver rounds you can get for, depending on quantity, from say maybe $1.45 to $1.75 an ounce over spot. In some cases cheaper, of course, depending on quantity.
In volume. There's also a problem that we need to pay attention to, and that is there are a lot of rounds that are coming out of other parts of the world that are not pure silver. There's a great deal of counterfeiting going on. The one advantage of the junk silver is each one is unique and individual, which makes counterfeiting a very, very dubious, unprofitable situation. But you have to be very, very careful. There's been a lot of gold fakery going on. Using
gold more than silver, actually. Yeah, that's true. Gold more than silver.
Well, I've heard a lot of concerns expressed about silver as well, so you have to be really, really careful.
There are some. There are. I would say this: if you stick with a well-known U.S. mint, and there are several, you should be safe. We have had no. We've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of ounces from various U.S. mints, and there have been no issues whatsoever. But you're right. If you buy from an unknown mint from a foreign country, yes, that definitely could happen.
Well, another place is if you go to swap meets or flea markets, and you'll see somebody there with a little case full of coins. You have to be very, very careful about that.
Very careful. Yes, go to a reputable dealer, either online or in your town, and buy your gold and silver there. And in most cases, like I said, if it's a U.S. private mint, in fact, we've never known of a case of a U.S. private mint selling any kind of counterfeit stuff. They've been in business for years. If they did, somebody would get on to them and they'd be out of business. They would be called out on it, especially today. But yes, do avoid traps, like you said, flea markets or swap meets or individuals on Craigslist, that kind of thing. You could definitely get taken.
All right. Well, Janice, thank you very much for the update on that. And my comment about the junk silver was aimed at the people who don't have the resources to buy rounds and bars in the volume, at which point the premium over spot would become advantageous. A lot of the places
could.
Yeah. Okay.
It could.
All right.
Although we sell very small quantities of silver rounds, with our premium isn't extremely high for small quantities either. So you can buy rounds at a good price for sure, even in small quantities.
All right, but I think we all agree that having the physical metal in your possession is a good idea. The paper contracts.
Absolutely.
The paper contracts are just way over leveraged. Janice, thank you very much. We're coming to the end of the show, and I need to move to another phone call. Blaze over in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. Okay. Here's the one major question I wanted to ask all my life. In 1948, when they entered Israel, the Jews entered Israel back into Israel, why in the heck did they let the Dome of the Rock stay there? Why? Why didn't they destroy the Dome of the Rock?
Well, you need to look at the maps, because when Israel was first created, Jerusalem wasn't part of it.
I know, but they had the whole city, everything.
They didn't have Jerusalem.
They were there. They didn't have Jerusalem?
They didn't have Jerusalem. Go back and look at the map of Israel at its founding. Israel was very angry about that, but they did not have Jerusalem at that time. And Jerusalem has always been declared a shared city by the United Nations, and that would make it very, very politically dangerous for Israel to go on in and blow things up. Anyway, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And, I think there's something that you need to keep in mind, and this applies to Jews, Christians, and Muslims equally. You go in and you start bombing their holy sites, you're going to get an out-of-control, unpredictable reaction. It's just a very dangerous, reckless thing to do. Now then, remember the case of Bernie Madoff with the loot, where he had a little Ponzi scheme going on. This was a guy who was already very rich, co-founder of NASDAQ, had more money than any one human could ever spend in a lifetime, but it wasn't enough because he's a classic money junkie. And so he set up a new investment firm that turned out to be another Ponzi scheme. And he ran it for 12 years. And people were complaining to the Securities and Exchange Commission, this is a crooked operation. And they never did anything about it. In fact, the SEC investigators went on over and handed him resumes. They wanted to quit the SEC and go to work for Bernie because the money was just pouring on in. Now, one of the guys who was really out there saying this is a crooked operation was Harry Markopoulos. And he had gone to the SEC time and time again with warnings about what Madoff was doing. He literally had all the evidence gift-wrapped on a silver platter, and the SEC still ignored it. Well, now he's out there saying that he's continuing his investigations. He's now aware of 3 new Wall Street Ponzi scams, one of which is larger than Bernie Madoff's. And remember who got stuck paying the losses from Madoff's Ponzi scheme collapse was you, the taxpayer. We are really in an age where the entire financial system of Wall Street is surviving on fraud. How many more revelations do you need before you understand these bankers are not serving the community? They're not serving the people. They're serving themselves. We're in an age of looting and plundering of the American people to just keep this little system going a little bit longer till after the election, and it's all going to fall apart right after that. And they may not even be able to hold it off until the election. We still have a little ways to go out there, and we could see this whole thing start to implode. I mean, look at the stock numbers today. Deutsche Bank's in trouble. All right, let's see. I think we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines now for the rest of the show because we're coming up on a commercial break in the last segment of our program. And Hillary Clinton is now out there saying that, yes, in her view, the whole world does have a natural right to come to the United States of America without any controls whatsoever. Meanwhile, over in Germany, refugees are bragging about how Africans are now controlling the German girls and how the migrants are the new kings of Germany and the women are just there for their pleasure. Now, there's been a new piece of data that has come on out. Ukraine has refused to publish any of its radar data on the day that flight MH17 was shot down, and has continued to insist it was Russia. And apparently there's new data from another radar that was operating in the region at the time that shows there was definitely no missile attack on MH17 from the rebel side. More indications that this was Ukrainian involvement. And again, my pet theory is they wanted to shoot down Putin's presidential plane, which was in the same area at the same time, and they misidentified the aircraft because they had the same paint scheme, and they shot down Flight 17 by accident, and they've been covering it up ever since. All right, we're going to take a break, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a lot of the people in the corporate media are beginning to see the phrase, the media, as a pejorative. And the Washington Post is literally out there begging its readers not to refer to the Washington Post as part of the media, which is ridiculous. But I think everybody is understanding that if Hillary does self-destruct and Donald Trump becomes president, it is going to be a seismic shock to the current entrenched corporate media. They bet on the wrong horse. They destroyed their own credibility in supporting Hillary Clinton. They were openly on display as trying to shift this election away from the American people. And they're already trying to figure out how they're going to limit the damage that's coming. And so we're going to see them all breaking away and say, oh, well, I wasn't part of that, really. We were just over here talking about gardening and how to make donuts, and we were never part of that. So they're already in damage control, and I think that may signal that the internal polls are showing that Donald Trump is going to win in a landslide that is simply too overwhelming for the vote stealers to reverse. But I think the Washington Post is not going to be able to disentangle themselves from this disaster because they have been at the core of it all along. We already know that polls are showing the American people's trust in the corporate media is at record low levels. And one thing I think is going to be very obvious if Trump does indeed take the White House, and that is the corporate media is going to have to dramatically change how they do business, or they're going to be out of business. So let's talk a little bit about computers. We've only got a couple minutes left here. The hack over at Yahoo is now worse than anticipated, and apparently they're looking at over 500 million user accounts were compromised in 2014. Yahoo is saying it's a state-sponsored event. They're not pointing a finger at any one particular country. But I have to wonder what nation state is interested in your Yahoo account password. Now, apparently in the latest iOS from Apple for the iPhones and the iPads, they deliberately weakened the backup encryption. It can now be cracked 2,500 times faster than the previous version. One has to wonder why they did that. They had working security in encryption on the backups, and now it's deliberately weakened. I wonder who gave them that idea. Now, if you're on Windows 7 and Windows 8, you can turn your automatic updates back on because Microsoft has now officially deleted the Windows 10 nagware from Windows 7 and Windows 8. If you want Windows 10, you'll have to pay for it. That'll be a cold day in the dark regions. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Remember, you are part of the independent media. Working together, we can shout down the corporate media and keep the truth going on out to the American people. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.